As the August 2nd deadline continues to draw closer, concerned Americans all across the country are asking the tough question, what really happens if a deal isn't reached in time? Now, should conservatives consider Senator McConnell's controversial proposal? And what poses the greater economic risk to the country, raising the debt ceiling or going into default? Now, Frank Luntz is standing by with a special D.C. focus group tonight to weigh in on the great debate. All right, Frank, before we get going, I got to ask the two-part question. Would they vote for any politician that would raise taxes and spend more money? And B, would your group support a 10% across the board tax cut?
Okay, let's take it to Sean's question first. I'll do the second one. How many of you here want to see a 10% across the board tax cut? Raise your hands.
That's what businesses do.
Even with the deficit where it is, you still want to cut taxes.
Yes. Every time.
Go ahead, James.
Every time a business wants to bring in more customers, every time they want to make more money, the first thing they decide to do is have a sale. They call it Black Friday for a reason.
You're nodding your head. You agree?
Yes.
Because?
Like, companies will hire more if they can afford more. If they can't afford more, they're just going to cut.
History teaches us that every time taxes are lowered, economic activity increases, and more revenue goes to the government.
You're nodding your head. No, you're shaking your head. No. Why?
Rising tide floats all boats.
We tried supply-side economics before, and it really didn't work very well.
Now let me ask you another question by a show of hands. If the Republicans vote to raise the debt ceiling, and they still get significant budget cuts, but they cast the vote to raise the debt ceiling, would anyone in this room vote against them as a protest? Raise your hands.
Yes.
Oh, come on. Seriously? You vote against them?
Yes.
Why?
Because they were put in, with the election, they were put into the office to hold with the debt ceiling.
I wouldn't vote anybody in who would do the exact opposite.
So you're on the exact opposite side. Who else would vote against the Republicans if they vote to raise? Bobby in the back. Bobby, tell me why.
I would vote against them because they haven't passed a budget, and now they want more money.
You're going to replace them with somebody who's going to spend even more?
That's a primary.
Let Obama come up with the money.
That's insane. You can't argue about anybody on the Republican side passing a budget because they don't have control. You have a president who hasn't come up with a budget. You have the Senate in control. The Democrats have never come up with a budget.
Okay, here's the deal. The president does not come up with a budget. It is not his job. That is Congress's job to come up with the budget.
Do you guys agree with that?
That's how it works.
Yeah. Do you guys
come up with the budget?
I want a show of hands. Who believes it's the president's responsibility to come up with the budget? Raise your hands. Who believes it's Congress's responsibility? Okay, so majorities say Congress. So then what do you want them to do?
Very quickly, what they need to do right off the bat, they need to both cut the services we don't need. I'm going to be controversial here and say that unemployment benefits need to be cut, but taxes need to also be raised. We need a compromise.
You're nodding your head.
No.
I agree 100% because there's so much waste that's going on that we have no clue of what's out there being wasted.
I agree with that. What you subsidize, you get more of. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you need to call back Medicare. I mean, not Medicare, welfare.
Mm-hmm.
Because
cut welfare. How many of you by show of hands would cut welfare? How many of you by show of hands would cut Medicare?
Yes.
Who would not cut Medicare? Tell me why not.
The seniors need to be able to live. They need to be able to get the care that they need.
But what about if you personalize Medicare, which is giving seniors more control over what they get and more responsibility for what they do?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I can agree with that.
So you'd accept that?
Yes.
Rich?
Yeah, I would say that you need to cut Medicare because if we don't, it's going to be bankrupt. So it's better to have something in the long run for them than nothing at all in the rate we're going.
One more overall question. Do you think they can get it done? Yes or no?
No. Yes.
No. How many of you don't think they can get it done? No. Now, Sean, before we were here, we've been showing them some of the ads before we came on the air. And I want to show you one in particular. Almost all of them were negative. But this one caused a very emotional reaction. You're going to notice that neither dial climbs that high, and we're going to find out why in a moment. Let's take a look at the ad.
This is Daniel. His dad died before he was born. His mom works 2 jobs but can't afford necessities like health insurance. Lucky for Daniel, Head Start will prepare him for school. The school lunch program will help him grow strong, and the kids' health program will give him free vaccinations. But some in Congress say we can't afford to help Daniel anymore because times are tough. America knows better. We can't afford to abandon Daniel. Don't throw America's babies out with the bathwater.
Okay, who thought that was a good ad? Who thought that was a horrible ad? What was wrong with it?
Daniel is my Avery. My sister was 5 months pregnant. Her husband was killed in Afghanistan, and this ad just disgusts me. So many military overseas are fighting for this country, and our children need to be taken care of.
But that ad puts a false premise up. It's not Daniel versus cuts. Our country spends so much money on programs we don't need. Every politician says waste, fraud, and abuse, and no one ever does anything about it.
First thing I want to say is I'm sorry for your loss. Everyone here is sorry for your loss. Thank you. And we understand what you're going through.
What kind of country is it that we're in such a situation that you can throw a baby, anybody's baby up, and say without government, this baby is going to be in a terrible situation? That's a horrible place for our country.
Okay, hold on, guys. Sean, go ahead.
All right, I have two questions. I'm going to ask them back to back because I think we've hit a lot of good points. And by the way, I too echo your sentiment. We're sorry for this woman's loss here. Very quick questions. Show of hands. Would anybody vote for a politician that said they would raise taxes and spend more money? Yes or no?
Who would vote for a candidate who would raise taxes? Only one out of the 27 people, Sean.
And spend more money?
And who would vote for a candidate who wanted to spend more money?
Were those two separate questions?
Separate questions.
All right, and one last question, Frank.
One final question.
And here's my last question. I'm getting a little sick and tired of the president always blaming that he inherited the worst economy. He's had nearly 3 years. Blaming Bush. I'm getting to the point where I think this president's becoming a crybaby. How many agree? How many disagree?
Who says Obama's a crybaby?
I have a question.
Who voted for Obama and says he's a crybaby? You voted for him and says he's a crybaby. Tell me why.
We've just seen a continuation of the policies of his predecessor. See, the thing is, his complaints would have been valid if he didn't continue the past policies.
You voted for him.
Yeah,
and he's a crybaby.
There's enough time to go by before you start to say it's not from the past. It's now your problem. You have to solve it.
Sean, this is a very powerful group. It's a very emotional group. This is a very emotional issue. Let's hope that there's somebody in Washington who's listening to what the American people have to say.
All right, Frank, tell everybody thank you. Great job tonight, as always. Let not your heart be troubled. Our great American panel is next.